James never imagined he'd be writing his story on Reddit. But sometimes life forces you into situations you never thought you'd face. At 32, he thought he had everything figured out: a loving marriage, a shared future, and a partner who truly understood him. But sitting alone in his friend's apartment, staring at his phone filled with desperate messages from his wife, he realized that sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayals. The story began 8 years ago at a mutual friend's party, where James met Mia, then 22 to his 24. It was one of those perfect meetings that people dream about: instant connection, shared interests, and the feeling that they'd found their person. They both loved the same movies, shared a passion for hiking, and just got each other in that rare way that makes relationships feel effortless. For 4 years, they built something beautiful together. James honestly thought he'd found his soulmate. Mia wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his best friend, his adventure partner, his confidant in everything. When they married 4 years ago, it felt like the natural culmination of a love story that had started with all the right ingredients. Their marriage seemed solid, built on a foundation of genuine friendship and shared values. They were the couple that friends looked up to, the ones who seemed to have figured out how to balance independence with partnership, passion with stability. James felt incredibly fortunate to have found someone who complemented him so perfectly. But 3 months ago, something changed. The shifts were subtle at first, the kind of changes that you notice but dismiss, hoping they're temporary. Mia started pulling away in small ways that accumulated into something larger and more concerning over time. The phone became her constant companion in ways it hadn't been before. She was always scrolling, always texting, always distracted by whatever was happening on that screen. When James would try to have conversations, she seemed physically present but emotionally elsewhere, responding to messages that apparently couldn't wait. Her social life expanded in ways that excluded James. More nights out with friends, more events that she attended alone, more reasons why she needed space from their shared life. When James expressed concern or asked to join occasionally, she'd deflect, saying she needed girl time or that he wouldn't enjoy the particular group or activity. At home, the distance was even more noticeable. The easy intimacy they'd always shared started feeling forced. Conversations became surface level. The comfortable silences they used to enjoy now felt awkward and strained. Mia seemed to be going through the motions of their relationship, while her real energy was directed elsewhere. Have you ever noticed your partner pulling away and ignored your gut instincts? Share how you handled those early warning signs in the comments. When James asked directly if something was wrong, Mia had ready explanations. Work stress was the most common excuse. Her job was demanding, she was working on challenging projects, she needed time to decompress. Sometimes she'd say she just needed space, which seemed reasonable for someone dealing with professional pressure. James trusted her completely, and that trust would later become the source of his deepest pain. He believed her explanations because he wanted to believe them, because their relationship had always been built on honesty, because the alternative was too painful to consider. Trust, once given completely, makes us vulnerable in ways we don't fully understand until it's betrayed. Last weekend, fate intervened in the cruelest way possible. Mia left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to shower. A casual moment that would shatter James's world forever. Her phone buzzed with a message notification, and what James saw on the screen made his stomach drop instantly. The message was from someone named Josh. "I miss you. Can't wait to see you again." The words were simple, but carried implications that James desperately hoped he was misunderstanding. But his instincts told him exactly what those words meant, even as his heart refused to accept the reality.
James faced a moment that every partner dreads, the choice between respecting privacy and confronting suspicions that could destroy everything. His hands shaking, he opened the message thread, hoping against hope that he would find innocent explanations for what seemed damning.
Instead, he found dozens of messages that told a complete story of betrayal. Flirty conversations that had clearly been building over time. Intimate exchanges that showed emotional connection far beyond friendship. Explicit messages that left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. It was all there, documented in painful detail.
The discovery hit James like a physical blow. He could barely breathe as he read through evidence of his wife's affair, each message feeling like another knife wound to his heart. The woman he trusted completely had been living a double life, carrying on an intimate relationship while maintaining the facade of their marriage.
When Mia emerged from the bathroom, James was waiting with her phone in his hands. The confrontation that followed would be burned into his memory forever. Not because of anger or shouting, but because of the quiet devastation of watching his marriage die in real time.
Mia didn't deny the affair when confronted with the evidence. Instead, she broke down crying, immediately shifting into damage control mode. She was sorry, it was a mistake, she never meant to hurt him, all the predictable responses of someone caught in betrayal who suddenly realizes the magnitude of what they've done.
What's the most devastating thing someone has ever said to minimize their betrayal of you? How did you respond to those hollow apologies?
The details emerged through Mia's tears and James's stunned questioning. The affair had been going on for 2 months. Not a single moment of weakness, but a sustained relationship that had developed alongside their marriage. She'd met Josh through a work project, which explains some of the work stress she'd been citing. The progression was typical, but no less painful. It started with texting, evolved into drinks and private meetings, and eventually became physical. Each step had been a choice to prioritize this new relationship over her marriage vows. Each escalation a further betrayal of the trust James had placed in her completely.
Mia swore the affair was over, that she regretted everything, that it didn't mean anything. But James was struck by the hollow nature of that particular phrase. How could something that had consumed 2 months of her life, caused her to lie repeatedly, and destroyed their marriage not mean anything? If it meant nothing, why had she risked everything for it?
James moved out the next day, unable to remain in the space where he'd discovered his wife's betrayal, where every familiar object now felt contaminated by deception. He went to stay with a friend, carrying only immediate necessities, and the shell-shocked feeling of someone whose reality had been completely rewritten overnight.
The aftermath brought constant contact for Mia. Texts, calls, voicemails, begging him to come back and work things out. She was in full reconciliation mode, promising that they could fix their marriage, that the affair was completely over, that she would do anything to earn his trust back.
But James was confronting the fundamental question that faces every betrayed spouse. How do you rebuild a relationship when the foundation has been completely destroyed? Trust, once broken by sustained deception, doesn't simply regenerate because the cheating partner feels remorse after being caught.
The psychological impact was overwhelming. James felt like he was drowning in a sea of questions and self-doubt. He replayed every moment of the past few months, looking for signs he'd missed, wondering if he could have prevented this somehow. The what-ifs were endless and torturous. Have you ever blamed yourself for a partner's betrayal? How did you learn to separate their choices from your worth? Self-blame is common among betrayed spouses, but it's rarely justified. James found himself wondering if he hadn't been enough, if their marriage had been a lie, if there was something fundamentally wrong with him that had driven Mia to seek connection elsewhere. These thoughts are natural, but destructive. Affairs are choices made by the cheating partner, not inevitable consequences of relationship problems.
The most painful realization was the death of the person James thought he knew. He still loved Mia, but the woman he'd married, the one who valued honesty, who shared everything with him, who seemed incapable of such deception, apparently didn't exist. The person he'd been living with was capable of sustained lies and betrayal, someone he didn't recognize at all.
This identity crisis affects many betrayed spouses, mourning not just the relationship, but the person they thought they'd married. It's a unique form of grief because the person is still alive and seeking reconciliation, but the version of them that you loved was revealed to be partially fictional.
James's story resonated with hundreds of people on Reddit because affair betrayal is unfortunately common, and the emotional journey is remarkably consistent. The initial shock, the self-blame, the inability to reconcile the person you loved with their capacity for deception. These experiences connect betrayed spouses across different circumstances.
The community response was overwhelming, with people sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Many offered practical advice about therapy, legal considerations, and self-care during the acute phase of relationship trauma. Others shared hard-won wisdom about the long path to healing, whether with or without the cheating partner. The community response was overwhelming, with people sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Many offered practical advice about therapy, legal considerations, and self-care during the acute phase of relationship trauma. Others shared hard-won wisdom about the long path to healing, whether with or without the cheating partner.
James scheduled therapy for the following week, recognizing that professional help would be essential for processing this trauma and making good decisions about his future. Individual therapy is often recommended before couples counseling because betrayed spouses need to work through their own trauma before they can meaningfully participate in relationship repair. The support of close friends proved invaluable during this crisis. Having people who could provide practical help, emotional support, and honest perspective made the difference between falling apart completely and maintaining some stability during the worst period of James's life.
The grief comes in waves, as James described, moments of feeling okay, followed by crushing emotional pain. This pattern is normal and expected in trauma recovery. Healing isn't linear, and setbacks don't represent failure or weakness. They're simply part of the process of integrating a devastating experience.
James's decision to focus on his own healing rather than immediately trying to fix his marriage shows wisdom that many people struggle to develop. The impulse is often to rush back together to stop the pain, but sustainable recovery requires individual work before relationship work can be meaningful. What advice would you give to someone whose world has just been shattered by betrayal? What helped you most in your darkest moments? The update showed growth and hope despite ongoing pain. James was taking concrete steps, therapy, leaning on friends, reading community support to move forward constructively. He wasn't making impulsive decisions about his marriage while in acute trauma, which often leads to regret, regardless of the choice made. Professional counselors emphasize that recovery from affair trauma typically takes 2 to 5 years, and that timeline assumes the couple stays together and does intensive work. For those who divorce, healing often happens faster because they're not constantly triggered by the presence of the person who betrayed them.
James's story illustrates why affair recovery is so challenging. It's not just about forgiveness or working through relationship problems. It's about rebuilding your entire understanding of reality, learning to trust your judgment again, and deciding whether the person who betrayed you is capable of the changes necessary to prevent future betrayal.
The question of whether marriages can survive affairs is complex. Research suggests that about 60–75% of couples stay together after infidelity,
But staying together doesn't necessarily mean thriving. Many couples exist in a state of diminished trust and ongoing resentment that may be worse than divorce. Successful affair recovery requires the cheating partner to take full responsibility, demonstrate genuine remorse, not just regret at being caught, commit to complete transparency, and often change fundamental aspects of how they operate in relationships. Many cheating partners aren't willing or able to do this level of work.
For betrayed spouses like James, recovery involves grieving the relationship they thought they had, learning to separate their self-worth from their partner's choices, and developing new criteria for what constitutes a healthy relationship. It's essentially rebuilding your entire approach to love and trust.
The community support James received demonstrates the power of shared experience in healing. While every situation is unique, the emotional journey of betrayal follows predictable patterns, and learning from others who've walked this path can provide both hope and practical guidance.
James's commitment to working on himself, regardless of what happens to his marriage, shows the kind of self-advocacy that predicts good long-term outcomes. Whether he ultimately reconciles with Mia or rebuilds his life alone, the work he's doing now will serve him well in future relationships.
The story reminds us that betrayal trauma is real and severe, but it's not permanent. With proper support, professional help, and time, people do recover and often find happiness that exceeds what they had before. James's journey is just beginning, but his approach suggests he'll emerge stronger than before. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for the best things that follow. James's willingness to share his story, seek help, and commit to healing suggests that while this chapter of his life is ending painfully, the next chapter may hold possibilities he can't yet imagine.
The future remains unwritten for James, but his commitment to healing, his openness to support, and his refusal to make decisions from a place of trauma all suggest that better days lie ahead. His story serves as both a cautionary tale about the devastating impact of betrayal and a beacon of hope for anyone facing their own dark night of the soul.